All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mike Community Podcast. This is episode 110. If you haven't checked out the previous episodes, episode 107 is already out at Scale King of CBS this morning. Episodes 108 and 109, two-part special. By the time you hear this episode, you'll have heard those episodes. Retired NYPD Detective Specialist Bob Masucci is part of the miniseries The Men Inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, talked about being a member of the FEMA team for New York's task force, being an instructor with FEMA, rescuing a wedding band that was stuck down a Con Edison vault, and some rather other interesting rescues, including one particularly funny one at the Statue of Liberty in the winter of 2000. So those two episodes with Bob were great, and I hope you enjoy them. And I hope you enjoy this one too, episode 110, with my next guest, who spent 29 years as a federal agent fighting crime both domestically here in America and abroad, which we'll be discussing, and almost 30 years between the U.S. Border Patrol, Customs, and Homeland Security. He conducted many operations, getting many a dangerous individual involved in many a felonious activity off the street and into a well-deserved jail cell, retiring after, like I said, 29 years in 2015. He currently serves as a senior manager of global compliance for Western Union. That is retired Special Agent Alex Alonso, who joins me now on the Mike Community Podcast. Alex, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Thank you. Really glad to be here and appreciate you having me on the show.
No problem. Thank you for being here. So first question is always an easy one to ask it to all my guests. Where'd you grow up and what were those early years like?
So I grew up I was born in Miami and grew up in a neighborhood called Hialeah. It's sort of like it's another city. It's a big city of Miami as well. It was predominantly a Cuban neighborhood back then. A lot of migrants that had come from Cuba had settled there. They had gone to either New Jersey or Tampa or Hialeah. We said it. So I grew up in that neighborhood, and it was a great time. It was a good time. Everybody was the same. You know, outside with your friends, you spoke Spanish. I'm sorry, English, and at home you spoke Spanish. So you grew up bilingual, didn't even know it.
There you go. It's kind of my background too. Growing up here in New Haven, it's a large Hispanic community. It's a large minority city. So, same thing. Outside, you spoke English, but at home, particularly my grandparents who didn't really have a good mastery of English, spoke Spanish with them too. So, it definitely helps. That paves the way, obviously, for any job, especially your job in some of the countries you worked in. Having that bilingual skill is very, very imperative. So, when did you first get interested in the idea of working in law enforcement?
So growing up in Hialeah, that was not what you really aspired to be, a police officer, right, or a cop or anything like that. But having had some experiences with them, it wasn't the best career route to take, right? So I didn't have really an idea of what I was doing. I had been a part of all kinds of odd jobs. I had even tried to start a landscaping company with a friend of mine, a childhood friend who had experience in that. We had trucks and everything. But one evening, coming home from a job, I got run off the road. I fell into a canal and almost drowned. And so I thought, as I'm going down, I'm thinking, what am I doing here, right? So, I struggled, was able to get out of that situation and swam up in a canal in Broward County. And as I got up, I saw everybody, clapping. Cars had stopped and they helped me out. And when I got home, I thought, what am I doing? I got to do something with my life. So a lot of times I would sit on my front porch with my grandfather, who had, was from Spain, but had gone to Cuba and made his life there, and then had come now was living with us in Miami, our house in Hialeah. So I would sit there with him, listen to stories. And I think I was like maybe 18 years old. And this car parks in front of my house. And my mom is getting ready to come back from work, and the car is parked right where she parks. And I'm thinking, who are these people? There's two guys in the car, not sure what they're doing. They seem preoccupied. They don't even notice my grandfather and I on the porch. So, young, tough, macho kid I thought I was. I walked up to them and knocked on the window and like, what are you guys doing here? They didn't even acknowledge me. They're just doing their thing. They're talking. I see one guy talking on the radio. I'm like, what is this? What's going on? So I'm banging on the window, like, put the thing down. And the guy just looks at me and does this to me. And I'm like, oh my God, who are you? And here I am, I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just, who are these guys parking in front of my house, right? So anyways, all of a sudden I see the guy, he reaches inside his shirt, whips out a badge, opens the door, flings me back. I go back into the fence, goes around, and they take off running down the street. And there's another guy coming down the street. They arrest him. It was some drug bust they were doing. And they take him down, they arrest him, and they're bringing him back. And I'm just paralyzed. I'm just seeing this unfold in front of my house, and I've never seen that. I actually knew the guy who they were arresting. And so as the guy brings them in, the cop, I guess, who had pushed me out, tells me, "Sorry, kid, just part of the job," and throws the guy in the back, take off, and they took off. It was a super cool Camaro at the time. It wasn't like your typical narc car that you saw at that time. And I stood there on the side of it. I'm thinking, doing his job, that's a job? That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So after that, Mike, I thought, man, that's what I want to do. I want to be a cop. I thought it was the coolest thing. So I applied with, hundreds of police departments. I'm exaggerating, right? But all the ones at the time: Hialeah Police Department, City of Miami, Metro. I went as far as applying with Homestead, but I had a horrible driving record. Up until that time, I had all kinds of tickets. My license had been suspended. And so now I was a little bit more mature, and I had, not gotten into those jams. But I remember being rejected by, by most of all those police departments I mentioned, with the exception of one of the local ones. And I went through their whole process, interview, and was there on the last interview. And the police brass were all there, and they said, "Son, you'd be a great candidate for us, but your driving record is horrible. So come back in a year and talk to us." I was devastated. It was like, somebody had punched me in the gut. I was devastated, but I had applied with everyone. And I had even applied for the US Border Patrol. I didn't even know what they did. And so I got home, and there had been this yellow, big manila envelope that said Immigration and Naturalization Service application. And I finally opened it, and I saw, because I didn't really know what that was. I wanted to be a street cop, like to do what those guys had done, right? I saw this, and I put in the application and got called in for an interview, and eventually got hired by the Border Patrol.
I always like to ask I do a lot of interviews with firemen and police, as probably from talking with our mutual friend, Bob Starkman. I always like to ask about the academy. But this is an interesting academy because it's not your conventional police department. It's obviously not your conventional fire department. This is a federal agency, and it's the Border Patrol. And there's so much that goes into looking to what potentially can be smuggled in. People think of drugs, but it doesn't have to be drugs. It could be humans that get smuggled in. It could be weapons that get smuggled in. Take me through what you were learning in that specific academy.
And Mike, you hit it on the nose. That's exactly right. So for me, it was all a learning experience, because when you went through the academy. So I went through a series of interviews. They first you have to meet the basic qualification, right? Certain schooling, certain this. So then you go through a pre-interview, and they put you through some scenarios. And I thought I had failed miserably. I answered the best I could. They put you through a scenario that there's no way you're going to win. They'll tell you you're stationed here. You're told to guard this post and do not leave this post. And then all of a sudden, a kid comes running up to you and says, "Hey, my brother's drowning in the river. Can you help me?" And, what do? Do you leave your post? Do you help this kid? And then, you come up with answers, and they're like, "No, sorry, that's not available. Your radio's dead. What are you going to do?" Because they want to see what kind of character you are, right? So in that particular scenario, I answered, "Well, I'd try to go help this kid on the river." And of course, it was a fake. The kid now there's no brother, there's nobody. You left your post. Now 100 kilos came through, or 100 aliens came through. Now what are you going to do? Your supervisor asks you, "Okay, what are you doing? Why did you do that?" So I went through those kind of questions. I thought I had failed miserably, but apparently they liked my answers, and they thought I had potential. So I got hired. I got my papers, and Mike, I can't tell you how happy I was. It was the first thing. So again, from Hialeah, Florida to Kingsville, Texas was where my station was. I went there for a couple of days. They swear you in, they talk to you, they make you go through all these processes, and then you're shipped to Glencoe, Georgia, where the Federal Academy was, at least for the Border Patrol at that time. I went through in 1986, so that's where my class was the 202, Mean Green 202. Border Patrol agents across from class 1 to wherever they are today will never forget their class. And that's what it was. So it was a daily routine of running, exercising, learning not only criminal law, right, and your basic stops and frisk and learning, the amendments and what the rights are of individuals, as well as what you can enforce, but you also had to learn immigration law, which has no rhyme or reason to it, is whatever the political issues and countries and things like that. So you had to do that. In addition, you had to speak perfect Spanish, or at least at an acceptable level at the Border Patrol. So fortunately for me, I knew Spanish. I could speak Spanish, but I had never been formally trained in Spanish. In other words, I didn't know specifically where, the ñes go, or the N, or where the accent really goes. I knew how to pronounce the word. So I would get in class with other, agents, and the teachers would try to say, okay, Alonso, get up and explain this sentence. Okay, great. It was something related to the border. You're coming across the border. I would translate it in Spanish, and they would say, okay, what is the present perfect tense of this? And I don't know. I don't know how to say it, but I could say it in Spanish if you want me to, and I would. And I would pass with flying colors. They couldn't understand how I couldn't do this or that. But so I didn't focus on Spanish. I focused on the immigration law and on the other aspects. And I worked, weekends. I had left a job. I had a small child. I had, took a relatively, large cut in pay to go over to the Border Patrol. And so I was not about to not make it through the academy in this job. So I did everything I could to get through.
Talking with retired customs agent Alex Alonso. And that's the same thing with me, because there's speaking Spanish growing up, and even to this day, you don't speak the formal proper Spanish. For example, when somebody's parking a car, ¿dónde va a parquear? And the proper term is ¿dónde va a estacionar?
Right.
Obviously, but it's just the slang. It's just that's how we are. So I don't even think it matters what specific dialect of Spanish it is. I mean, you growing up in a Cuban area, me being half Dominican, half Puerto Rican. It's just, there's, again, the formalness of it doesn't hit you until you're in a professional setting. So I'll ask, Border Patrol, we've seen a lot of guys and gals, get hurt on the job and get killed through the years, because being in a law enforcement agency, it's inherently dangerous as it is, but especially there with all the things we talked about that are coming through. Some people are good people that just, they're looking to get into the country for a better life. They're not going about it the right way, but that's the goal isn't bad. Some people are really bad, and that's where the deaths in the line of duty have come from. In that year you spent, is there a particular hair-raising encounter that you can remember?
So yeah, for me, and really it was actually a little bit less than a year, Mike, because while I'm at the academy graduating, I actually did well, and I graduated top of my class. I was #1 in all academics and all, even shooting, which I had never really shot a gun before, other than at trash cans and things like that. I had, I'm glad, because the Border Patrol Academy was a great formal training ground, and they took it very seriously, everything. And so I'm glad. I have a lot of respect for those guys. And I'm glad I went through this academy and went through that rigorous training with them. Right. But so as soon as I got out of the academy, the day I'm actually giving the speech at the ceremony where we got our badge, there was a background investigator sitting in the crowd waiting to do my background for U.S. Customs. Excuse me. I had applied with all agencies, all things, and finally that application had gone through, unbeknownst to me. And so there was a background guy there ready to do my background. And so I went into a little room in full Border Patrol uniform with a badge and everything. It felt horrible, but I went through the background. But again, I was being shipped to Texas, where my duty station was going to be, and my family was in Miami at the time, so I was seeking to get back there, right? So anyways, I then the next week I traveled to my duty station and start work. And of course, as a trainee, you get the worst shifts and you get everything, and they toss you. So one particular hair-raising experience that I went through, there's many, and Border Patrol agents are right in the middle of it, right in the thick of it. And where I was, it wasn't as bad, because at the time it was McAllen, Texas sector, what they called McAllen sector, but I had a Kingsville checkpoint station, right? So it was, a continuous border checkpoint for the Border Patrol. So I worked that checkpoint. And so, but because as a trainee, I was still learning the ropes, they had always like a training officer with you, and they would take. We were dropped off in an area, and it was pitch dark. The job was to wait until the crowd of people that were supposedly coming, was a large crowd, would get to a certain area, and then I would come out and identify myself and then try to gather them all and get them in a place, right? This had been my first experience in really working those kinds, because up until then, I had only conducted vehicle stops with a training officer. I had placed, individuals under arrest and but there was always supervised. This was the first time I was really on my own with my partner. And I was in the front area and he was in the back area, as they called it. And so it's eerie, right? Because it's dark as night. I can't see anything in front of me. All I'm thinking about is what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. I can't, all you could hear is, the night sounds, right? And then little by little, you start hearing little crunchy footsteps, some low talking, and it starts, and your adrenaline is building up and everything's coming up. And I'm thinking, all right. And I've got a 6-shooter and a radio and a flashlight. So, right. So I got all stuff going on. So I elect to put the radio in my belt and have the flashlight in my hand and my hand on my gun, right? I'm not going to point at anybody. I'm just going to be ready. So all of a sudden I feel, okay, it's time. I see them coming right up on me. I come up and I shine the light and I say, manos arriba, la migración, same thing. And it was chaos, Mike. It was chaos. The person in front of me just froze in his tracks and just, peed all over himself. It was horrible. And then people just started running. So I could hear my partner down the way screaming and yelling. He was from Arkansas. His Spanish was like very, very with a Southern drawl, right? And I could hear him, manos arriba, stop, and we're gathering everyone. And finally we sort of put everybody together. People got hurt actually because they were running and bumping into trees, and it was horrible. And I'm sitting them down. I sat them down, and then we call our training officer and they're coming out. And I realized, this was an area where, yes, they had crossed the border illegally and they were coming into the United States illegally. There was no, the smuggler who had brought them through had just dropped them off in an area and just let them make their way, right? So these were kind of like, I don't want to say victims because they knew what they were doing. They were trying to cross here for a better life, but these were not the individuals that were the criminals that you would expect, right? So, but it was our job, and you had to do it, and you had to do it with respect and care and discipline, like you were trained. So, but it wasn't deep down, it wasn't what I knew that I wanted to do. But it, again, total respect to the U.S. Border Patrol. It is a tough job they have, and it's not always appreciated, and someone's got to do it, right? But at the time, I remember thinking, okay, great, we got this crowd, and where I should have been proud and happy about doing all these arrests because they were, they count as arrests on your record. It wasn't, it's not like you're getting the smuggler, the guys who are making these individuals victims and all these other things. But that came down the road later. But that was, I remember, a harrowing experience for me, thinking, wow, somebody could have really gotten hurt here. Some did actually, but could have been a worse situation, right? So
that guy that peed himself, that probably would have been me,
Yeah, I put myself in the same situation. He scared me as much as I scared him, right? And because if he would have had a gun, we would have had a shootout right then and there for sure, because I was ready, I was prepared, and I was in tip-top shape. I had just come out of the academy. I perfect reactions and all these things, and so it wasn't what I was expecting, right? It was just a group of men and women and children trying to, that had been dropped off and said, go up this way, you'll be fine. And that was it. So
1987, that brings us to your return to Miami after a year or less than a year, as you said, in the Border Patrol. You go over to U.S. Customs, and, as Starkman and I have talked about, this is the 80s. This is the height of the cocaine cowboys era. You know the area. You're from the area. So the process of getting into customs, Given your prior experience having been in a federal law enforcement agency, did that make your transition a little bit easier since they already knew your background and you weren't green?
Mike, exactly. So before I had taken to try to get into the customs and the treasury and all that, I had taken the treasury enforcement agent test, but it was only, they were only hiring at the time um, individuals with previous government employee or previous tenure, right? And I didn't have that. I was just coming off the street, right? Just coming off. And so by getting into the Border Patrol made it easier to get into another federal agency, and in this case, U.S. Customs. I had actually, while at the Academy of the Border Patrol, I had gotten called from to be a U.S. Customs inspector, the guys in uniform at the ports of entry and at the airports. And I really thought about that because I thought, wow, that would be also a cool job. But I thought, I'm in this job already. I'm really liking it. I was in the academy. I was so cool. I couldn't wait to get out in the field. So I actually turned that down. And then thank God later I got the customs agent job, or at the time it was a criminal investigator, what they called them. So anyway, so yeah, I'm sitting in my house. It was my day off in Kingsville, Texas. And, we had like 4 or 5 Border Patrol agents living in one area, in one house. We couldn't afford to, individually. And so the assistant patrol chief or the supervisor comes up and knocks on the door and says, "Hey, Alonso, the chief wants to see you." I'm like, "Wants to see me? It's my day off." Yeah. So I'm a rookie. I'm still trainee, right? I'm still haven't even gotten to the 5-month exam, because in the Border Patrol, even after you graduate the academy, then you had to do I don't know if it's the same now, but you had to do a 5-month exam and then a 10-month exam. And then you would be considered a full-fledged Border Patrol agent. Up until then, you're a trainee and you are, you have to take any shift, anything they give you. But anyway, so I rode back to the station, and, I'll never forget this guy, his words. He was a great guy. He sits me down and he goes, "Alonso, you're not in trouble. I just wanted to get your take on something. We've received here a form that is requesting your lateral transfer. Apparently, your application for U.S. Customs in Miami has gone through and been approved. It just needs your yes or no, whether you want to take the job or not. We're going to do a lateral transfer within the government." And even though there were different, like the Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, at that time was under the Department of Justice, and U.S. Customs Service was under the Department of the Treasury. So I don't know how they were doing a lateral transfer, but I looked at the forms and it was a lateral transfer, GS5 to GS5 in Miami. And so my heart jumped. I was really, really, man, this is it. This is the opportunity. I can go home. I could be, family, and this is where I want to be. I felt that was the job, but I hesitated, and I was thinking I was doing good. I was liking the job. I was, I felt this is what I was feeling better about it right now. I had, getting into the groove of things, understanding, even thinking of moving to Texas. And he got up and he closed the door and he goes, "Look, I'm going to explain something to you. I've been on this job for 15 years. I am at this level right now. It's taken me all this time to get to this level. With customs, you have the potential of, you're a 5 now. You'll be a 7 in a year, 9, then a 12, then a 13. In 5 years, you could basically be, at my level." And I'm thinking, why is he telling me all this? And he was doing it just because I guess he saw the naiveness in me, and he wanted to say, "Listen, here are the opportunities. You pick. We want to have you here, but let me lay this out for you." And he did. And I'm so glad he did, because it sort of snapped me into reality, and I accepted the job. And he said, "Look, just, don't tell anybody I said this. I just wanted you to have the full knowledge of what you do." And I'm so glad he did that, because that was early on in my career. He guided me the right way. And I, sure enough, I got to make that change. And then, Mike, I got to Miami, and it was like heaven, right? So, so I remember reporting to the SAC office in Miami. It was a place we called Papa 100. That was like the headquarters code, Papa 100. It was on Brickell, and where the bridge is on Brickell in Miami. If you've ever been down there, you could see it off the highway. You could see the boats parked on the water. It was so cool. I'm thinking, man, this is neat, so neat. I didn't know what to expect. I had turned in my badge and gun over there to the Border Patrol. Now had, come back to Miami, and I report my first day. And I'm in the elevator, and there's this one agent that gets in there with me, right? You could tell he's come off the boats. And he looks at me, and I'm in a suit and ready for my first day, not knowing what to expect. And he's like, "Are you the new guy? You new guy?" And I said, "Yeah, I just came over from the Border Patrol." He's like, "You're going to be on the Marine Division, right?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what I've been told, the Marine Division." And he says, "You're going to be there probably at least 5 years on the boats." And I'm thinking to myself, only 5 years? I'm hoping I can stay, for as long as I can. So apparently at the time, being on the boats, some people took it as a negative thing, because, you got pounded out there every day, going out on the water, chasing, doing all these things. It got to you after a while, because they were interdiction officers, right? As opposed to being special agents that worked all these cool investigations and cool cases. But at that time, to me, it was heaven. It was the best thing that could have happened to me, right? Get on the boats, go out. It was the coolest thing to do that.
Man. So, on the boats in Miami at that time, take me through, I guess listening to that, people coming in, and the waterways are the most common ways to get anything, any kind of contraband. It could be stolen cars, which we'll talk about, which you had to roll in later on. It could be obviously the natural thing of drugs, as we talked about earlier at the border, weapons, anything, any kind of thing that's not legal. The waterways is the main way in some respects to get it through, or at least try to get it through. So when you're on the water in these boats, what are you looking for in spotting a suspicious boat? Much like if you're a traffic cop and you're spotting a car or a driver that just doesn't look right, how do you separate a boat that's just people hanging out, going fishing, or just having a good time between somebody who's up to no good?
That's great. That's good, Mike. So coming over from U.S. border, now understanding the immigration laws, now I had to understand the border, right? What was a border, and what authorities you had, right? Because as a Border Patrol agent, you have the authority to search certain things for individuals and for evidence of people, violating immigration laws, where now U.S. Customs, basically it's smuggling, right? Those were the primary laws you had to understand. And the authority as a customs special agent or as customs officer, what you had and what you were able to do, right? So on the water, if you can determine that someone was coming in from foreign, you then had that authority, right, to board the boat or do consent. So really, it was tough, because imagine the vast waterways of South Florida, right, from the Keys all the way up to Jacksonville and higher, right?
Yeah.
All that area that people could come from, and mainly it was out of the Bahamas where they were coming up our way, right? So, but how do you distinguish a boat that's coming up from the Bahamas from a boat that just went out, is going out fishing, snorkeling, scuba diving, doing whatever, and coming back in? So you'd have to be very, very good at interviewing individuals and doing all these kinds of things. Or at the time, there was a center, it was called the Blue Lightning's Operations Center, right? So they had a team of, it was like, headquarters, I don't know how to explain. You would walk into this room and there was like all kinds of beacons everywhere and satellites identifying boats coming from foreign. And then, so we would go out every night or every day, whatever the shift was, and you'd get a call from Blue Lightning Operations Center. Hey, there's a potential target crossing at this coordinates, go out there and take a look. And so we, shoot on out there. If it was a boat in the middle of nowhere, we'd stop them, interview the people, talk to them, and do all these things. My first assignment, I think I had been, once I got out of the academy and came back, because I went to Miami, spent a month in Miami, learning things, then went back to the academy in Georgia for another 4 months to get trained in U.S. Customs law and more criminal law, right? Now I come back to Miami, and now 2 weeks out of the academy, I'm sent to the Bahamas for 2 weeks, and you're going to just live on a boat. And then from that boat, whenever your shift is, you're going to get on another boat and go out and hit targets, stop targets. We were in conjunction. This is the first time I learned to work with at that time, it was the Royal Bahamian Defense Force. So you would go out, pick up a Bahamian officer on their, we called it the rock. It was the little trailer they had on a rock, and they basically work with us all day. And then we'd go out and just stop different boats. We made so many arrests and seizures working with them out there. People smuggling cocaine or marijuana even in those days from Bimini, from the Bahamas into South Florida. And that was some of the most exciting stuff you could do, right? You're chasing a boat. Sometimes the targets they'd send you out, it was a dud, nothing. It was nothing. But a lot of times you'd end up trying to stop a boat and then they just take off. And now the chase is on. And so, the boat captain is there you're bouncing up and down in the water. You have your weapon. You're if you don't hold on, you could just fly off this boat. It is amazing to that adrenaline rush to get it. Then at the time we had, helicopters that could help us come in and sort of like guide us on top of them. It was crazy. So we'd stop, jump on the boat, secure the people, identify, search, talk to them. And it was at this time that I learned that I had a little bit of a ability to talk to people. I just figured, most of the guys that we were stopping at that time were Cuban boat drivers, right? So I would, hey, where are you from? I'd start like, I knew something. In fact, some of the people I stopped, I knew from my neighborhood. And I was like, whoa, what are you doing out here? And they were looking at me like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I was like, man, this is crazy. So I got to realize that. And as I worked more on the boats and doing that, I got to realize that one of the best things to do would be to talk to the individuals to get it. And then plus I had the good fortune of having guys like Bob Starkman, right? Who was already he had been a CPO, a Customs Patrol Officer, which was probably one of the best jobs at the time in Customs, and then became a special agent. And he had, he was already running in investigative groups and had informants, and they were to us like we were the Marine officer, and we'd see them as the elite. These special agents would come in at all hours, dressed all cool, or doing all these cool operations, and we would see them and like, man, that's what you aspired to be, right? And here Bob was the type of guy who would sit and talk with you and kind of like, hey, what are you doing? And would also allow me, for example, he'd give me opportunities to work cases with him, like, hey, what are you doing this week? What are you guys off? When you get off, come and work some overtime with us, right? Because you had to work a little bit of overtime. So myself and partner on the boats at the time, Miles, we'd go with him and we'd do cases with him and we'd see how they operated. And that's what we wanted to do, right? So but the boats, it was a blast. I didn't care how long I was going to be on there. It was such a cool thing to do, and really, really learned, the difference and learned Miami from a different perspective.
Absolutely. We're talking with retired Customs Agent Alex Alonso here in the Mike Podcast. This is episode 110. What's interesting about it is that, and I get this from reading Bob's book, Inside Both Courts, is that now when we hear about a drug bust in the news, oh, they got, 40 kilos of coke, or they got, now fentanyl is the big thing, unfortunately. They got all this fentanyl, in the Bronx the other day. It's like, wow. But for you guys during this era, that was just another day at the office. There was so much of this stuff to go around.
Like it was, and people don't, I don't know if they don't believe it or if they don't see it, but it was true. It was nothing to stop a boat that had 300 kilos on it. It was, one of my first cases working with Bob and his group, he used to work in a group called Group 8, the FIST team, Freighter Intelligence Search Team. And those guys had all kinds of cases. My first case working on one of those boats was 5,000 pounds of coke. So that's what they were watching, a freighter in the Miami River, just parked there with 5,000 pounds of coke. And I remember, you're as a Marine guy, you get called to one of those groups. These are the elite agents, right? So they said, okay, Alex, you speak Spanish, you work with us, just in case. So you're going to be assigned to this car, this group. And I remember that morning I was so excited, ready to go. And I'm like, I wake up early. I got to go meet them at the hotel on the river where they're going to have the briefing. And this is my big opportunity. We had gotten permission from the Marine Division ASAC to allow us, me and a couple of other guys, to work, and support this investigation. So I go in the morning to get gas, and I have, those days they gave you one of these government cards, and I go to the attendant and I fill up, and I go to pay, and he's like, no, this card is bad. And I'm like, no, give me back the card. I gotta use it. He's like, no, I gotta take it from you. I'm like, this is a government card. So I'm like arguing with the guy. It's like, 6:30 in the morning, and I gotta get to the briefing, and this guy's gonna keep my card. And I'm like arguing with him, and I'm like banging on the door. It starts off bad that day. Anyways, he kept the card. I took off. My car is full. I told him, I'm gonna come back for it. So anyways, I go to the hotel, do the briefing, and I'm assigned to follow whoever leaves that van, whoever leaves that port with what they believe to be some of that product, or all of the product, because they're not going to take all 5,000 pounds at once, right? So, all day you're watching this. And so cars come up, cars leave, cars come up. And this particular, a van shows up, right? And he loads a lot of it onto it. So on the radio, Alonso, you're going with this team. So I'm going on the surveillance, and I'm all excited, trying to follow, trying to keep up. And we get into this little area of Miami, Little Haiti, right? So we, the car parked, the van stops at a stop sign. Another car pulls up, guy gets out. They talk to each other, and the guy hands like 2 or 3 packages out the window. And now he puts them in his trunk. So now what do? The van goes this way and the car goes that way. So the team all of a sudden says, all right, I got the van, wherever it was. That was unexpected. Alonso, you go with the car. So I go with the car and the supervisor of that group along, right? So I'm in one car, he's in another, and me and him following that car. And it's not easy to just, 1 or 2 people to follow a car, right? So he's going that way, and the van goes off another way with the big load. So the car pulls up into this housing complex. The guy gets out and goes in, and he just leaves the car there with 3 kilos in the trunk. So the supervisor needs to get back to the big load. So he tells me, you stay with the car and just hang out here and do what you got to do. So he leaves me, and he leaves me. And there had been a city of Miami cop that had worked with us, and he was on this surveillance too. And so he meets up with me, and he gets in the car and goes, man, what's up? What's wrong with your supervisor? He leaves you all by yourself. So I didn't know what to do, right? So I'm like, okay, well, what are we going to do? We got to watch him. So anyways, all of a sudden he says, don't worry about it. I got some friends. We're going to come here. We're going to figure this out. He calls his buddies, like, all these city of Miami, the goon squad, they look like, they were all like these humongous guys with really shirts. And then we're going in, we start knocking on doors. And sure enough, we find the guy, we identify the guy. He consents to us looking in his trunk, and there they were, 3 kilos of cocaine just there. Took the guy. And then later in court, so, all of a sudden now you have to testify in this case. So here I am testifying just on the part of these 3 kilos, when this guy who was they were probably stealing some, who knows? And all these high level lawyers were, I was basically eaten up on the stand, by these high level lawyers that protecting their clients and all. But it gave me a lot of experience in working cases like that.
One operation that occurred around this time that I want to get your perspective on is Operation Overlord. So take me through what that entailed.
So once again, and I have to attribute this to Starkman, right? So he never lets me forget this, right? He goes, I got you off the boats, remember that, right? So he always says that, but the fact is he really did, right? He went into the ASAC at the time, which is like the assistant special in charge, and said, what are you doing? You got to get these guys off the boats, and myself and partner Miles. And so they assigned us to an intelligence group, right? So this was myself, partner Miles, and 2 other agents. What we were supposed to do was record when seizures occurred at the ports. We were a cargo intelligence group. That's what we were named. Criminal investigators to a cargo intelligence group. When seizures occurred at the port by the U.S. Customs inspectors or at the airports, whatever, we would show up, get the intel, and then start working like the intelligence part of that case. We weren't actively working the investigation. That was left up to either the DEA task force, because remember at the time, Mike, there was President Bush's South Florida task force that was very active, and they were, I mean, fully funded, budgeted. They had some outstanding DEA and customs agents working together. Tremendous cases were coming out of that. We were just very new agents, you know, getting the intel on it. So it was ironic because, for example, you'd show up at a scene, there was a seizure, and let's say 2 kilos, a low level seizure, 2 kilos. At the time, Miami was so busy that anything under 5 kilos was being rejected and sent off to the state. That's how it was, right? So usually if these elite groups show up and it was 1 or 2 kilos, they would say, just hand it back off. And the inspectors, you know, they worked hard to get those seizures, right? But of course, these other groups were working major cases and they didn't feel 2 or 3 kilos unless it was tied to another investigation. So me and my partner, we would show up, take the intel, and sometimes if that other group declined it, we would do it. So we would come up with all these creative ways of, we'd call the person who was supposed to get the delivery and make all these, and then we were making cases out of it. And so we were like, hey, you guys aren't supposed to be making cases. You guys are just supposed to be getting the intel, but we were learning, right? So, so now the inspectors liked us because we didn't decline their cases. We took anything they found. So, but at the same time, we had good friendships with the other guys on the task force. So I guess my first undercover, and this is from there stemmed Operation Overlord, right? So we started developing, right? But my first undercover that I could recall, I get a call at 2 a.m. at my house. Again, one of these seizures had occurred at the airport, excuse me. And I have to go out there and report the intelligence. I was the duty guy that night. So sure enough, get in my car, shoot down to the airport, 2 a.m. And at the time it was in Miami, the airport cargo area had docks. You could just get on and jump on. And the DEA guys that had worked that case, it was a task force, but DEA guys that had got that case, I think it was like 25 kilos or a total of 50 kilos maybe in flower boxes. But so there was 2 flower boxes, like 25 kilos. I can't remember exactly, but it was that type of level. So they had gotten a driver who had gone to pick it up. So they stopped the guy. The guy spoke Spanish. They couldn't really talk to him. So they asked if there was an interpreter or whatever. I show up, and the DEA agents are slick, cool guys. You know, they're like, hey, Alex, look, this is what we need you to do. Ask the guy, see where he was going to take this to. So sure enough, I start talking to him in Spanish. Hey, where are you going to take this to? What are we going to do? The guy is, I mean, he's astonished, Mike. He's scared in his wits. His eyes are like this big. He's like, oh, I don't know. So he says, look, he finally agrees to tell me he was going to take it to the post office on 72nd Street there in Miami. There's a big post office there. So what I told him, what were we supposed to do? I was just going to take the van. Somebody's going to show up there. Okay. So we devise a plan. I say, all right, I'm going to say that I was just working with you and that you promised me $100 to help you load this box or these boxes. He's like, okay. So we get in this van and he is scared. He is scared to the wit. And I realized, oh man, you know, I'm going to be meeting a guy. I've not really done undercover work that much yet. I've just done little things here and there, but this was, so I remember I had my gun in my back here, had a Hawaiian shirt, and I tell the guy, if you do anything, you're going to be the first guy I shoot. That's what I tell him when I get in the car. So now he's like terrified, right? I tell him that to scare him because I don't want to be in any jam. So we get in the van. He drives over to the place and we're waiting. And sure enough, you see a car. It's like now 3 a.m, right? You see a car driving around. The guy shows up, Peruvian guy, to the window. He looks at me and he asks the Nicaraguan guy, hey, who's that guy? Nicaraguan guy can't talk. He's so scared he can't talk. So he just looks at me and he turns to me with his big red eyes and I talking. I tell the guy, hey, you know, listen, you know, he said I could get $100 if you help me. I need some, you know, my wife is pregnant. I need some help, whatever. I just come up with a story. So he looks at me for a long time and he says, all right. And we go, he says, go around the back here. So we had made a plan beforehand with the DEA agents and the other task force guys that were there. I was going to, you know, help them load the box. And when they did that, I was going to put my hands through my hair. I had a lot more hair back then and I could, you know, put my hands through my hair there. And so everybody agreed. Great. So I went into this blindly, Mike. I'm thinking cavalry's going to come any minute. Everything's going to go great. So we go to the back, start helping the guy load the into her, and he's putting it in. So we get it in, and I start putting my hands through my hair, and he's looking at me like, "What are you doing? Like, what is it that you're doing?" And the Nicaraguan guy is like, his eyes are this big. He knows what's going to happen, but he doesn't say nothing. So I keep doing it. Now I'm getting nervous. Now I'm getting really nervous and scared. Nobody's showing up. So pull out my gun, police, put your hand in the air. We're screaming and yelling. And the Peruvian guy's like looking at him. He's looking at the Nicaraguan guy. And I don't even have my focus just on the Peruvian guy. The Nicaraguan guy could have taken off running and I would have not known because I was just so centered on this. I'm all nervous, right? So I'm holding my gun out at him. Get up, put your hands in the air, get down on get down on the ground. And unbeknownst to me, I later realized that the Nicaraguan guy is doing exactly what the other guy's doing. Whatever I'm telling the Peruvian guy to do, he's doing the same thing. Put your hands in the air, get down on your knees. So I get them down and they're both down and I'm waiting and nobody's coming still. Could you imagine something? I'm waiting. And I'm thinking, my God, I've caused all this commotion and nobody's coming. And so finally, down like this narrow lit area, I see this one DEA agent who, great guy. He was he was running. His hair is flowing in the wind. He was what a cool dude, right? He's running. I'm coming, Alex, I'm coming. And anyways, they finally got there. And I was like, oh my God, thank you guys, and we get everybody. And so now I'm like, my nerves are coming down, everything's coming down. And he says, hey, Alex, ask the Peruvian guy if he knows where this is going. So I'm looking at him. I said, all right, let's try it. So ask the Peruvian guy. Peruvian guy says, yeah, it's going to go here. He was more slick. He was a little bit higher up in the chain. The other guy was a driver. This guy was a coordinator, right? So he tells me it's going to go. It's a Colombian female. She'll do it, whatever. So he's on the phone with her, tells her where to pick it up. And we say, we're going to be at the post office again. Same plan. DEA agents, guys, please, I'm going to do the same thing. Watch me, have an eye on me. And they're like, yeah, don't worry. We got you. This is great. We're going to get to the next level. So sure enough, Mike, now the Peruvian guy, he's talking to me inside the car. He's really slick. He's not he's nervous, but he's not scared like the other guy. He's like, so how much time am I going to do? Is this going to be all right? Can we work something out? How does this work? And I'm just telling him, look, you just do what you got to do. Make sure everything goes right. And we'll say that you cooperated and we'll see. Yeah. Okay, great. So sure enough, the Colombian lady, she's driving around. She's telling him, why are we doing it here? It's too nervous. And he's like telling her, no, here's where it is. Here's where it's safe. Anyways, long story shorter, she pulls up, she makes a mistake, she pulls in head first, right? So immediately we get out, and when she sees me, she goes, oh no. She knew right away, right? And he's like, no, everything's fine. He's working with me. He's the guy who brings it to me. And she's like, oh no. So she doesn't even turn off the car. She's just looking at me, and she goes, okay, put it in the back. But she just does not take her eyes off me because she doesn't know me. She knows him. And so here we are. It was a little Mustang, and we're trying to shove these big flower boxes with all this coke in the back. So we're taking time, and the Peruvian guy, he's looking at me like, are you going to give the signal? So I start putting my hands through my hair again. Nothing. Again, my same thing. Hand through my hair. The Peruvian guy's looking at me like, what are we doing? So anyway, once again, I get out, take my gun out, I point out, and she's like, oh, so she tries to back out. I reach in, put the car in drive, take the keys out, pull her out of the car, put them both, again, the same thing. Get it, hands up, hands down, whatever. And again, hold them there until, once again, I see the DA guy running with his hair. Oh man, we're sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with you guys? How can you not have seen me? So finally they got there, and it was a lesson to me in, okay, don't just go blindly and trust everyone in this, because that was a very nerve-wracking, harrowing experience for a guy who had never really done undercover, to do all this, right? So that was the first time. So sorry, Mike, for the long story, but
that's fine. This is a podcast. Go right ahead. It's your story.
So
I'm okay with that.
But after that, we would start sitting there with my friend with my partner at the time, Miles, and we would talk, Miles, why don't we set up our own undercover? I had read at the time Joe Pistone's book, My Undercover Life in the Mafia. I think it was around 1988 or 89 or something.
88.
And I thought that was the coolest thing. Like, here's this guy who infiltrated for this long period. That's what I wanted to do. Because at the time, because of all the intelligence we were gathering, we were finding out that the airport, you know, those ramp workers that work the flights, they ran the airport. They were smuggling. They had, you know, hierarchy in operations. There was all kinds of things going on. So we thought, well, what if we develop something like that, or do, you know, my background had been, before I had been into law enforcement, I had also been in an import and export company, and I had learned the, you know, ins and outs of shipping cargo, you know, importing cargo and shipping it out and all that. And I thought, what better cover? We can pretend we're a legitimate company and have things run through our thing. So we had a good supervisor at the time who gave us free reign, and allowed us to do all these undercover operations and purchases. And at the time, undercover ops for U.S. Customs was kind of like, it wasn't a new thing because we had built that into our statute, right? That was something we had, but it was something relatively new as far as managing the operations, right? You know, how budgets were controlled, because we got to a point, Mike, where we were actually using what we called trafficker directed funds, right? And proceeds. We would seize money from individuals and use that money towards purchasing cars and phones and or leasing, right? Because we didn't really buy, and putting it back into the operation to make it look legitimate. And it was good. It was working really well. And then we, again, another thing I attribute to Starkman is learning how to work with other agencies, right? He was a master at that. And to this day, he's got contacts everywhere, right? So this is something I truly picked up on him, right? Working with your local law enforcement, who had excellent informants, excellent working. We worked with at the time, South Narcotics Squad, and they were fantastic, but we worked with everybody. And they came up with all kinds of informants. We would then work the cases federally or state. We would you know, figure out how to do it. And we had so much fun doing it, and had some really good items. We had one particular case that an informant of one of the local officers had gone into a jam and was looking to face some heavy time. He had some information on a fugitive that lived in Brazil. This fugitive was responsible for like a 5 kilo load. He had been arrested, was going to be charged, and he became a fugitive and took off. And he was living in Brazil. He had been there for 5 years, Cuban guy from Miami. And so the informant had a lot of connections with this guy and had said this guy was looking to send a big shipment. So what better time to introduce us to this guy in Brazil and talk to him about sending a big shipment through my fake company, our fake company that we had, right?
Right.
Shipping company, right? So the informant sort of talked to the guy, and the guy decided, hey, you know what? I'll pay for you guys to come up here to see me so we can talk. And so sure enough, we flew down to Brazil. This was one of my first international undercover ever. I'll be honest with you, I was very nervous because I wasn't sure, you know, how connected this guy was in Brazil. It turns out he was pretty connected. And so I wasn't sure what was going to happen. But so we went down, and again, it was, you know, we were believers of working with all the agencies, right? With the local law enforcement, with you know, our DEA partners, FBI partners, whoever we had, ATF. So in this case, it was a DEA agent who had been looking for this guy. So we went down with this agent, myself and my partner. I was going to do the undercover, and we went and we get debriefed when we come into the country. The DEA attaché sits us down in Rio and says, look, very dangerous. This is what it is. We brief him on the case. And what he wants is, he wants us to meet on the street in front of the hotel we're at, conduct a meeting, and there you go, right? So I know right there and then that that's not going to work. It's not going to work because here's this Cuban guy who's been a fugitive for 5 years. He's longing for more, connection with somebody from Miami. The informant is Cuban. I'm Cuban. So he's going to want to take us out, want to show us around. Right? So I say that and they, no, it has to be here, it has to be there. Okay. So we sit down and now we brief. There's going to be the Brazilian police covering us, DEA, my partner. So I tell the informant, I said, look, the first thing he's going to want to do is get us out of here, right? Because, he owns this place. He knows this place, right? So tell him we can't. We have another meeting. We have other things to do. And before it makes sense, he goes, look, he paid for our tickets. We should at least have a drink with him, whatever. And I go, yeah, but we can't. We have to do it here, right? So he says, well, listen, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to just sit here and tell him that we can't leave. Anyways, what happens, Mike? The minute the guy shows up, he gets out, parks his car right in front of, we're having a beer in one of those little outside things in the streets in Rio. And he's like, hey guys, what's happening? He comes up, hugs the informant, big Joe hug, shakes my hand. And he's like, hey, this is the guy. He sits down and he says, come on, let's get out of here. Right off the bat. And so I'm thinking, no, we're gonna stay here. Let's talk business. Let's do this. He's like, no. Come on, I'm gonna show you these great places I know. And anyway, so I say, I keep trying to keep him there. But he's like, he gets up and starts like, hey, what's going on? And the informant's like, yeah, man, what's going on? Let's go. Like he was supposed to be helping me, keep the guy there, but he was on his side now. So I make a decision. And I don't think this was a bad thing, right? I was so, at the time, I had gotten a little bit cocky because I had gotten pretty good at doing undercover work. And so I thought, you know what, this is the right move. I should have never done this, but this is what I did. I said, yeah, let's go. So pay for the beers, get in his car, and off we drive. And I remember as I'm getting in the car, I saw my partner's face across the street. Like, he's like, what are you doing? Right. So everybody's now upset because I've broken the protocol. And they're right. That was not the right thing to do. I should have, but my instincts as an undercover guy at the time, and remember, I wasn't a bad guy. I wasn't portraying a bad guy. I was portraying a guy who worked at an import-export company who had information and knew how to do it and needed some money and was just gonna show you guys how to do it, right? So really, they needed me. They didn't want to kill me, right? So that's my mentality. So, but as we drive off, he starts now going through these back streets, dark areas, and I'm like, oh man, what did I do again? So I'm regretting my decision. And I'm in the back seat there, and he keeps just looking at me through the rearview mirror. He pulls up into an area and gets out. I'm looking at the informant, like, man, what the hell? I told you not to. He goes, relax, everything's gonna be all right. So guy leaves, comes back with the girl. Informant comes to the back seat, girl sits in the front seat. She just turns around and just stares me down, just staring at me. And the car takes off. It's the weirdest thing, right? So I'm looking at her. She's looking, the guy's looking at me through the rearview mirror. Everybody's looking at each other. Nobody's saying anything. It's just weird. My mind is going 100 miles an hour. Starts talking to him in Portuguese. They're going back and forth in Portuguese. I can't make it out. And I don't know what's happening. So I'm really nervous now. So they then pull up to another area after about 5 or 10 minutes of driving, another area, same dark areas, no lights it seemed. So the girl gets out. Then she comes back to the car, gets in the door, turns around, and just stares at me. And I'm like, I tell the guy finally, hey, what's going on? Like, what are we doing? I thought we were going somewhere. And all of a sudden, there's a guy here at the window. And Mike, if I could tell you, to this day, I remember this, and it just, the back of my hair stand up. It creeps me out. Being of Dominican and Puerto Rican descent, you understand brujeria, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this guy was some kind of high level priest that the guy confided in, and he wanted to give him the blessing that I was okay to deal with. He got involved in this. We later find out. This guy just stares at me with the deadest, coldest eyes I have ever in my life seen, and it freaked me to the core. So I just kept looking at him. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I keep repeating my undercover name. I keep repeating what I'm there for. Like, so as I thinking that he might just my soul or something. I don't know what I was thinking, but I just kept thinking that, kept my cool.